engines fire up and ready to help it soar. Flight 370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur. Mayday, mayday, dangerous lithium-ion battery fire. 239 lives at risk, situation so dire. Lost contact with this Boeing commercial airplane. Faulty satellite data being the weak link in this chain. 20 superconductor scientists on this flight. Does that have anything to do with it? It just might. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's the 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology. To these EVLs that are defying gravity. 3-foot dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. Where did it go? What's the notion? Which island? Which ocean? Did it crash in the sea or on land? Fourth port out west for this sleight of hand. For 4 days the passengers' phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found impossibly in the wrong ocean. Dark energy, ether, cold fusion, 0-point energy. Not solid, liquid, gas, plasma is the key. A paradigm shift in our technology. An unlimited reservoir of energy. Floating through the air round and round as we stay helpless on the ground. Orbs of light defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblowers dying or getting disappeared. Heads of industry saying nothing to see here. Isn't that just a little weird? By humans this was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's the 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0-point energy, that's the technology. To these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3-foot dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is the spiel. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to Flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. I just want to thank everybody that's watching right now. I'm going to thank Yoshi, the gentleman who put that together. That's a really awesome song. And what that song is about, if you guys don't know who Ashton Forbes is, I'm going to show you real quick. He's a really awesome guy over here on X. And at X, he's at Just X Ashton. And also at YouTube, you can find him at that. And he talks about Flight MH370. Okay. And he was broken down the physics on it and that. And if you haven't seen it, there was like orbs floating around. The plane in that. We'll just watch it real quick here. Let's see if I can get that audio. I guess there is no audio. But if you watch it, there's going to be some orbs that like float around it. And like this was from a plane here. Yeah, you can see how they start to come. There's 2. There's 3. And it shows up on multiple different types of imagery too. So, and that was the flight that had the superconductor scientists on board. And yeah, it gets interesting. So I'm just going to pause that. You can go check it out for yourself. And one of the things this week, he posted about the Navy inventing a fusion reactor. And also I put some information up about that. And this is like stuff that is like real. Because I've looked into some of the stuff. Some of the stuff that he talks about the like Bohr Abernov or something like that effect. I have posted about. That's the picture that with the mushroom cloud on Twitter that I posted about the Soviet information that we got about some of their tests that they were doing. It puts off scalar waves, which gets into an interesting topic. But here's something I found this week that sort of applies to it, and it was from 1995, and that's the applied computational electromagnetics stuff from the postgraduate school. So please go check that out because that's an awesome topic, and Ashton is awesome at that. And the gentleman right above right here, that's the guy who made the music. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. I really do appreciate that. I have a special guest with me tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and pull us up. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I met Rebecca at the Libertarian Party convention. I think it was last year, or was it 2 years ago? Was it last year? Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, I was still muted. Maybe last year? I'm pretty sure it sounds about right. So.
It's when you were petitioning for Senate, I know. So it may have been the year before.
That was
I'm not
definitely
sure.
last year then.
Life's been crazy. So I crashed the Libertarian Party convention as a guest because I don't join things. Like I'm tired of both parties, whatever. But they had said it was okay to come as a guest, and so I was able to go up there and meet them. And I just didn't attend any of the party business part of it, but I wanted to make sure to get up there and see what they're all about. So she's in the Army, correct?
Yeah, Army veteran. Yep.
And she is big into Defend the Guard. And I'm going to let her talk about those two things in specifically real quick before we get into the rest of the One Minnesota stuff.
Yeah, sure. So my background is I'm actually the chair of the Libertarian Party in Minnesota. I also ran for Senate last election cycle against Amy Klobuchar. And we came out of that with a record amount of votes for a Libertarian candidate on a statewide race outside of a presidential election. Against Amy Klobuchar. We got 55,000 votes, which maybe that doesn't seem like much, but it was just shy of 2% of the vote. And so if you're like looking at close races, that was definitely, and Amy running against Amy Klobuchar, it was the Republican just got demolished by her. But, in a closer race, 2% is substantial. So I am going to be running again this next election cycle against Tina Smith. And so she announced, or not against Tina Smith, sorry. Tina Smith announced she's not running anymore. She's done. She's retiring. And so that left the seat open to not having any incumbent on the ticket, on the ballot. And so I announced, we're going to be doing this again. And one of my big things is Defend the Guard legislation. And for anybody that's not familiar with that, Defend the Guard legislation is an opportunity to nullify unconstitutional laws that have promoted the military-industrial complex, the corporatist infiltration that promotes war in the defense industry at the DC level, at the federal level, but doing it through the states. And so quite a few states across the country, Arizona, Idaho, Virginia, Montana, North Dakota, they all have their own Defend the Guard bill. And all the bill says is that for the state's National Guard to be able to be used in a combat zone overseas, that the Congress has to officially declare war, for wherever those people are going, which makes sense. That we're going to commit our military to 20 years of being overseas and in combat, then we need to have some checks and balances like the Constitution already originally intended. And it's in Article 1 in the powers of Congress. It says Congress has the powers to declare war. So that's what all this bill is. And that's important to me as an Army veteran. I did 7 years in the Army from 2000 to 2007. I was an Army medic. And I mean, if you know your history of the war on terror, You know that 9/11 happened. Al-Qaeda flew airplanes into the World Trade Center, you know, whatever. But it wasn't, George Bush didn't deploy troops to Afghanistan or to fight against Al-Qaeda. They deployed troops to Afghanistan. And those troops in Afghanistan were fighting against the Taliban, not Al-Qaeda. You know, so like we have this, and then shortly after that, by 2003, we were also fighting a war in Iraq. So neither of those wars, and they don't, you know, we never had they were undeclared wars because there was never a congressional approval for war or never a congressional declaration of war. They were undeclared wars, and we went into those without any kind of exit strategy or any kind of, you know, plan for. It ended up being just long-term, you know, basically the United States created a police state in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then now we know, you know, in hindsight, we have the conclusion, you know, what a disaster pulling out of Afghanistan was, what a disaster pulling out of Iraq was, because it created a vacuum that allowed ISIS to come in and then just absolutely undo everything that the U.S. military and the Army in particular had really worked for, which was undone the moment we left, which was always going to be the case, you know. So like somebody has to do something to keep this continual state of war and reel it in and bring it back under control, because the federal government has no intention of doing that. And that's because of the military industrial complex, the defense industry, the corporatism that exists at the federal level. So this Defend the Guard legislation in Minnesota would help work nullifying those laws that have really corroded away the Constitution and the need for Congress for having a formal declaration of war to use the Army or the military in general. And so this is our part in really being able to do that. Now, in Minnesota, though,
where on this webpage would they be able to find the links to it? As you're talking, I'm going to continue. So you can walk me through it as you're talking.
Yeah, let's see. I know that they just put it up. Maybe go to events where we have a rally on April 5th in St. Paul at the Capitol Rotunda. Yep, there it is. So if you click on that, maybe the website for the Defend the Guard is defendtheguard.mn, and that'll have more information on there specifically about the legislation. In Minnesota, we have an author. Well, we have authors and co-authors for the Senate version of the bill. And the way that legislation works is you have to have a Senate bill and you have to have a House bill. Both of them have to have authors. The House, they both have to pass through their committees, and then they both have to pass through, you know, like the Senate has to generally approve it with a majority, and the House has to do it too for it to become an official bill. In the Senate, we have a bill. It's SF 764, and the author of that is Senator Wiesenberg, Senator Liskey, Senator, I don't remember all the top of them off my head, but this bill in the Senate is significant because it's bipartisan. The Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate are literally working together to get this bill passed. And like I said, all the bill does is require that there be a formal congressional declaration of war for
What's the holdup?
Yeah, the Minnesota National Guard.
What it does, it basically says, hey, you can't use the state militia, the National Guard,
right,
unless you throw your heads out on the table, because you have to declare war. You can't take the stuff that's supposed to be meant for your state in case of an emergency or to defend the homeland to go play cops and robbers overseas without actually declaring war. So what's the holdup?
So in the Minnesota House, the bill just dropped in the House, so it doesn't officially have a number yet, but that'll be out very soon. The bill just dropped in the House on Thursday, actually. And the holdup is the Republicans. They have decided that instead of reading the Constitution and saying Article 1 says Congress has the authority to declare war, they've decided that the Defend the Guard bill is unconstitutional. And that's the propaganda that they're spreading, that it's not the unending, never-ending wars without an exit strategy. That's not what's unconstitutional. Passing a bill like this that would require congressional declaration of war is what's unconstitutional. Matt Bliss, Representative Bedell Duran, Representative Bjorn Olson, they're the ones that have decided that this bill is unconstitutional. It's the Republicans in the state. I don't know where the Democrats stand on it yet, because in the House, in the Veterans Committee, so it has to go through the committee first and get a hearing, and then the committee decides if it's going to, go to everybody else to be voted on. But in the House, the committee members, the chair and the vice chair, are both Republicans, and they have been actively working against making sure that this bill progresses at all. They've already said, we finally got Matt Bliss to openly and publicly say that he was going to not block it from getting a hearing complete at all, because he's the chair of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. But he has said that he's going to be absolutely and completely against it. He claims that every Republican in the committee are all on his side. What happened, and Matt Bliss has been very open about this, is that a general called him and told him not to pass the bill. That's what happened. And the way that legislation works, that for something to pass to become law, all you really have to do is compromise one strategic person in the state when you're working on passing a law into it, just and passing legislation into being law. And in this situation, that's Representative Matt Bliss, because he's the chair of the Veterans Committee. So he's compromised. And I would say every Republican on that committee are also compromised. They've been told by generals and lieutenant colonels and full-bird colonels, or all the top-ranking people, that they do not pass this bill. And this is what you have to understand about the military, is that there is a deep problem in the military, where officers, generals, lieutenant colonels, majors, they're going to use their positions to fight to maintain the wars, because they're more likely to progress in rank and further their own careers the more deployments and wars that they're involved in. So what they end up doing is that they volunteer their troops for the hardest, most, things that are going to promote them personally in their careers. And then they perpetuate this, this bloodlust that the military industrial complex relies on. But once the officers are compromised and they're only thinking about themselves, mind you, when you're out in a deployment and you're in combat, do you know who's not in combat with you? It's the generals and the lieutenant colonels and the majors. They don't go out and see combat. They sit on
you have personal experience on that. So like,
yeah, I absolutely do. They sit
tell
on
them about
base.
your deployments very quickly in like a 2-minute dealio real quick.
What's that? Sorry.
Tell them about your deployments and like your experience in a 2-minute real quick dealio.
Sorry, I can get talking about this. But so my first deployment in 2004 was to Ramadi, Iraq, with the 2nd ID, 2nd Brigade Combat Team. That's significant because we came out of that deployment, and for the Army, it was a 12-month deployment. Like I said, I was an Army medic, and we ran the aid station. I also did evacuations. I did set up casualty collection points out in the cities. So I wasn't just on the base. I was out in the cities doing doing these missions, cache sweeps, all of those things. But my brigade came out of that 12-month deployment with a record number of casualties and losses. We held that record for the entire 20-year span between both Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was in 2004 that we got there. So we came home under combat strength. We lost so many people, and it was part of Iraq, Ramadi, that ISIS took back first. When ISIS came into power, Ramadi was one of the first cities to fall. And that was my first deployment. My second deployment was to Baghdad during the surge. We actually got there several months before the surge was even announced. And Bush announced that they needed, 30,000 more troops, and there was this surge. Well, the way that they got those 30,000 extra troops was just by extending the people that were already there. And it took a 12-month deployment to a 15-month deployment. And so that was in Baghdad. I was doing QRF missions, quick reactionary force, which was basically like if something big happened out in the city. We had the wrecker, and I had, as a medic, I had like my truck set up so that, no matter what happened, we could just go out and respond. Mostly it was to collect bodies and vehicles, things that by the time you get out, well, and you're expected to be out very quickly. But by the time you get out, that's things have already gone down, or they just need help cleaning up. And so that was what I saw a lot of, just, the futility firsthand of everything that we were doing. And so, but after the second deployment, I actually got out of the Army. I had intended on being a lifer, and it was becoming too much. So I just personally had lost too much to keep going. So, but that's what I did. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about like everything in this that's going on. This is being involved in legislation. This kind of thing has been very healing for me, because now I have a way to take out that anger instead of internalizing it, like taking it out and actually doing something positive with that. So.
Oh, definitely. And that's when she talks about the generals, and that's she's been there, done that, has that t-shirt, she can talk about it. She's earned that. Yep. Okay. I just want to throw that out there, because sometimes if people don't know and they hear National Guard or whatever, then they're like, oh, well, no, like there's a difference between walls and people that deployed. Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to say that, out there. So please check out Defend the Guard and check out the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. And you will be running for Senator Tina Smith's seat as well. Correct? Because she's not going.
Take a knockout of it again. This allows me to have a platform and be able to talk about certain things that I wouldn't be able to as just a normal person. And anytime a libertarian enters the conversation, the entire conversation shifts, because we will talk about things that other people won't touch at all with, because they're so worried about winning the race. I'm not worried about winning the race. I want to dismantle the system. That's my goal.
And it needs to be dismantled. That's part of what we're going over with the One Minnesota stuff. So can you tell them a tiny bit more about the Libertarian Party, real quick, maybe a 2-minute snippet? Yeah. And I know I'm actually going to be joining the party. However, my views do not represent the views of the party. Okay. And I'll explain a little bit about me after we get done with it. Because like people just know me from Facebook or Twitter, and my threads are totally different between the two. And probably for a reason. Once I moved over to Twitter, it was for a reason. But
yeah, so we have this Libertarian Party Minnesota. We are, third party. We don't have ballot access in Minnesota, so we have a hard time getting on the ballot. The Republicans and Democrats have worked together to ensure that we have a hard time getting on the ballot, and been very successful with their positions of power to make sure that we just struggle with that. So anytime that we run candidates, there's like these major hoops we have to jump through. And I have a really good team that's been helping out, with petitioning and signature collecting so that we can get candidates on the ballot. But we have, 3 major areas that we're focusing on, kind of our sites on legislation. One of those is the Defend the Guard legislation, and any other legislation that would help promote, peace over, the war industry. The second would be anything that revolves around deregulating agriculture and promoting food freedom. And we have some pretty big food deserts in Minnesota where you just can't get good, clean, healthy food for a reasonable price. And I live one of those areas in northern Minnesota. We don't have access to things up here like you do down in the cities, but even in the cities, you don't have you have food deserts because of the nature of living in, a metro. And then the third one is ballot access and First Amendment rights. And like I said earlier, they put these hurdles in the way for us to be able to get on the ballot. And really, like, all of these are unconstitutional on its face, because the First Amendment gives us the absolute right to be able to petition our government to address our grievances. And the way that we do that is through voting. And so if you have third parties that aren't able to get on the ballot because of unequal and unfair challenges that are put in front of us that we struggle to overcome, then nobody in this country has true First Amendment rights. You don't have free speech. I don't have free speech, because we're not allowed to openly vote for the people that we register or we, relate to the most. And that's the case in Minnesota. So that's another one of the things that we're working to change, just really, things that the people in charge have put into place to keep people blind and obedient. So we're looking at taking care of, that. Anyways, that's going to be our focus.
Definitely. And so in Minnesota, third party has a history, though. I mean, like Jesse Ventura won the governorship before.
Yeah.
The Tea Party was very strong up here. Actually, Walz's recent interview that he did, he talks about like pushing back against the Tea Party and how an existential threat that was. And then he talks about also wanting full socialist government, though. I mean, like he talks about wanting the single payer and whatever else. And during that interview, he actually says something about really believing in having a shadow government. So if that shows what he's doing, I actually do have a recall petition I'll be starting this week for him. I just have to get the reasonings worded out and make sure I pass it by a lawyer that is worded right and all that jazz before I start that. But I'm doing a recall for Steve Simon and also for Walz. Walz is more of treason almost because of those things and his ties to the CCP. And then I can go down the list on that, actively working against the interest of the state. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we have the nonfeasance because he's just a quote unquote goofball. But when he says he believes in installing a shadow government, I don't think his appointments have been accidental. And we've been having in Minnesota tons of fraud, like to the tune of over $600 million. And I guarantee you it'll be over $1 billion by the time it's done.
Well, and if it was just money, the Democrats in the state, people like Walz, and I don't think it's just the Democrats. I think that people like Tom Emmer pretend to be a Republican, and that they're working with the Democrats to make sure that the Republican Party just stays compliant in doing Democrat bidding. That's the way I see it. But
I'm going to show you something real quick while you're talking about that. Okay.
Yeah, the judicial system's compromised. The voting system compromised.
Oh, yeah. The judicial system's so compromised. And they meet with the prosecutors behind doors, and I can't even go there. Yeah. Well, there's a case that I've been working on, and the people that I'm not sure if DJB Lethal is restreaming this or not. If so, he knows exactly what I'm talking about, and his group does. But there's a case that I've been working on recently that the guy he's having to sue the state of Minnesota through the federal government to get a scales tape. If people don't know what a scales tape is, that's the law that says, you have to record in custody interrogations. So if you're in the police department, they have to record you. So basically, if it's not voluntary, right? And that's so that way they can't coerce you in that. Well, they ended up beating him up while he was in there after he asked for a lawyer and stuff like that. So he's having to sue the state to get that evidence. And then there's body cam evidence that witnesses had said it was self-defense and stuff that they withheld from his trial in order to get him convicted. And this isn't a new thing in Minnesota. Most of the people that follow me know that I worked on the Marvin Haynes case. Philip Vance is another one, but he had enough people that I didn't need to do anything with that one. I just know a tiny bit about it, but I know he's enough to review that. I know he didn't do it. Mm-hmm. Philip Vance needs out as well. But it is what it is on that. We were trying our best to actually make a difference between James Renz's case about the speedy trial during COVID there, and then the push that I've been pushing on Gildia because our former Supreme Court justice up here, Chief Justice, had also done a ruling on Line 3 pipeline when it
Mhm.
went to your dad's property. I mean, she should have recused herself. And all that we're asking for is an environmental hearing. You know, by the
Mhm.
way, they punctured the aquifer, and you go through that on that. There's just a way to do things, and that wasn't the way to do it. In Minnesota, yeah, it's just it gets weird. So
It's a mess. I don't necessarily, all you can do is just fight every, example of corruption one thing at a time.
Oh,
But
definitely. So I
this
was
is,
working on the left,
mm,
and so before 2000, about 2019, is when I really started speaking up because I'd been doing some research on like, okay, for many years I've kept up with the crazy futurists and post-humanists that talk about like the integration of society with machine or like the gene editing type stuff, right?
mhm.
And then in 2016, DNI Clapper put out a paper saying, hey, by the way, the gene editing technology is the next existential threat to humanity. Okay. And he was
What
specifically
year
talking
did you say that was? That paper came out? You said 17, 16?
2016. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
DNI Clapper. If you look up DNI Clapper 2016 or CRISPR,
Mm-hmm.
DNI Clapper warning, it was all over the news, right? And he was talking about CRISPR. The one thing that CRISPR is used for is gene editing. So, but the document I have up here is from the 2024 One Minnesota meeting. Okay. And I'm going to put us down real quick because there's a name I really want you to see on here that was a part of this.
Oh,
Let me see
I see
if
it
I,
already.
yeah,
That
right.
sticks out.
Yeah. So she went there. So this is bipartisan. Okay. E2SG Partners. That's the environmental sustainability group and that. So
This is exactly what I'm talking about when I
it
say
was
people
introduced
like
by,
Tom Emmer.
yeah.
They're
So
they're working together. They're not different.
yeah, and I'll show you a little bit about more about this, and then I'll go do an overview. Okay, so I have another video over here, and this just shows how long this has been going on. Let me share this tab. And I'm not sure if the audio will play. We'll see. But if you hover, will it catch it? No, it won't. Okay, if you hover with a tab like that, um, and you're on the web page before you pull up the agenda items there, it will say 2015. So the 2024 one was planned in 2015. And over here on the tab, once you pull up the agenda, uh, your top one says Final One Minnesota. 2024 was supposed to be the Final One Minnesota conference. Okay. And let me come back over here. Oh, where are we at? Okay. Sorry. I'm going to pull you back up real quick on the side. Let's see if we can. Oh, is that it? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting used to this real quick.
Yeah, it's fine.
So, what One Minnesota is a conference that
Mhm.
was started many, many years ago. Oh, sorry. That's not the one I'm looking for. We're going to go
We
back.
use Restream also, and I am also trying to get used to it.
Yeah. Okay. So, this one, yeah, this was the One Minnesota. So, it goes back. If you go to the Horizons conference, is what it was before.
Mhm.
Okay. And you can click on the history there, and it'll give you a brief. It was started in 1975. And the group that became out of it was called the Minnesota's Future Commission. And they plan long term Minnesota's future. And the Horizons 2, you can go and find the audio for that. That is available through NPR, Minnesota Public Radio, in their archives. Same thing with the 83 conference. Now, they're supposed to have the audio on here or some of the stuff, but they've taken
Mhm.
most of it down because they reference being able to find it places. Like if you click on some of these, it won't really let you play any of this stuff. But what it was is a group of nonprofits, it was a group of foundations, and a group of basically think tanks along with a legislator that decide our future of Minnesota. Okay. One of the guys that was very influential with this was the first guy to be in charge of the Hubert Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And that's a guy by the name of Harlan Cleveland. Okay. It's he did. There's a summary up here. He was more than just worked under LBJ. Okay, he is the guy who there's his education. So after, it doesn't have it in here. I have to go over to, here's this one, the JFK archives. Here's a use guideline. Let me see, abstract. So, yeah, he was the U.S. ambassador to NATO. Why is it not on here? I thought it was. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So, yeah, he was the guy that after World War II, he helped set up the UN and NATO in Europe. Okay, he was on the Board of Economic Warfare or Welfare before that, and that's how he got appointed to it. He was the Allied Control Commission in Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the vice president of it afterwards. He started the UN RAA, and then became part of their China program. But he also helped with NATO with some stuff too there. Okay, and he became the director of the China program and was on the east side of that. And then after that, he went over to the University of Hawaii with the whole east-west portion in that. And then he worked under LBJ and JFK. So he worked under both of them. And it just gets real interesting because he was basically like a big spook, right? So people can go look up that on their own. This is one of the things we have gone over on here. So I'm going to share back over here. He's one of the few that worked under both JFK and LBJ. His friends are Hubert Humphrey and Orville Freeman from Minnesota. Well, that has connections to LBJ. And in fact, Humphrey ran against Kennedy for the nomination for president, I think, before that. And it gets interesting because Hubert Humphrey had one time lamented that without going through the vice president spot, he would never get to be president. Okay. And then JFK dies. And Orville Freeman was very involved with Billy Celestis. And Billy Celestis was LBJ's mob guy down in Texas that was a hitman, or had friends that were hitmen. They used Mac Wallace, and Mac Wallace actually came out talking about his stuff with the JFK stuff. But Mac Wallace was the guy who took care of LBJ's sister's problems because she was involved with this big love affair thing, and it gets into. All I'm saying is, like, people from Minnesota at that time were connected.
Right.
Okay. Harlan Cleveland was a part of that. And he was a president of the Hubert Humphrey School of Public Affairs when they started the One Minnesota program. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so back over here to the One Minnesota stuff, that's right around this time. Now, there's another group that you might be familiar with. And that's called the Aspen Institute. And if you're not, I highly suggest getting to know who they are.
I'm writing some of this down.
No worries. I'll be putting links in here.
There's a lot of history in our country that has just been kind of it's substantial. Things that we should know, and because we don't know, they're able to keep doing what they're doing, Yeah,
the Aspen Institute here. I'll just play a little video about them. They basically are like a World Economic Forum stuff for the U.S.
Okay. I'm not actually hearing anything.
It's a CIA plant. Okay, let's just put it that way. It's some sort of intel agency. You guarantee it runs it. Okay, because what they do is there's companies from up here that go over up there and they talk about like how they're going to control, basically how they want the future of the world and the U.S. to look.
Mhm.
Okay, so Harlan Cleveland and some of his friends and some of the people that helped start the One Minnesota program were from the World Future Society, and I've gone over that before. There's other videos that you can watch that I've done on that. I can send you the links too, and I'll also be putting them in because we're going to listen to some of the audio from the One Minnesota program from 2007. But yeah, so like these people have been actually like deciding how our lives run. And when I pull up the 2007 one, you're going to see some interesting stuff. And so in the videos that I did before, we listened to the presenters and they went over basically where they were at the time and then what they needed for the future. And one of them even talked about how we had been done with the industrial age and we're moving into the tech age.
Mhm.
How it was a new century for this stuff. And then also how jobs were going to be changing and everything else. And basically everything they said either has happened or they had planned. You know what I mean? And so it gets interesting. And then down here is the two Toms that spoke, and that was on Minnesota's changing demographics. And you can go through you can download the slide pack and stuff right there.
Mhm.
And on there, it literally has like how they decided to replace native born Minnesotans with people from other countries. Okay. They knew that with the aging population
Mhm.
and the problems with the birth rate, that there was going to be an issue. And instead of letting the economy or whatever the market naturally decrease a little bit,
Mhm.
they wanted to make sure that there was the same level of output or whatever. And so they brought people in. And they even talked about the problems with educating and stuff like that. And basically everything that you see is a problem in Minnesota today, they
Mhm.
talked about. And so since 2007, they've talked about it. And the thing of it is that they decided obviously to make the problem worse because they knew what some of the problems were. And so you can't say that both the Democrats and the Republicans didn't know. They attended these conferences yearly. Okay, because since 2007, let's see, down here at the bottom it'll show the years: 2007, 2008, 2009. I can go on, but I don't think I need to. I think there's a year or two that they skipped.
Mhm.
But like, yeah, they've been planning our future right here, the 2020 conference, in 2007. You know, and the key part of this though is Cray Computers. And I'll pull that up real quick. And I've talked about it before. And if people don't know what Cray Computers are, Cray Computers was a supercomputer company that was in Minnesota. And then it started at the University of Minnesota. And then the production moved over to Wisconsin because that's where the professor was from. Okay. But yeah, right here, Cray Computers. They had the supercomputers that they sold to NASA. They sold to the NSA, to the CIA, along with the UNIVAC, right? And like when Orville Freeman left working for LBJ, he
Mhm.
worked for I think it's EDA, something like that. It was basically a think tank that was using the Cray computers to predict the future with algorithms. Okay. And so that's what these things are for. They're large computing, but they were also using game theory model into these to predict the future.
Mhm.
Okay. So when we come back over here to the One Minnesota stuff, they were literally trying to use computer algorithms to decide what our future is, and if you don't have people that are doing that with a positive uh how to put it, a positive outlook, somebody that does not like democracy on either side.
Right.
I'm not even going to say democracy. We're not a democracy. That the left uses democracy as under the veil of almost like communism. Okay, so I'm not gonna say democracy. We're a republic because our senators are supposed to be apportioned by geographical area, where our House is by population, because it's like that for a reason. A pure democracy, sometimes people have some really stupid ideas, like when teenagers are snorting condoms or eating Tide Pods, right? Like, I mean, we should probably not have it be implemented in state law that's going to be pushed,
Yeah, just because 51% like it,
right? And so there's a whole thing to that, and whatever power isn't given directly to the state should be reserved for the counties, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And same thing with the counties is that if the city doesn't give you that power, and that you're not, legislated that power, then it should be reserved for the cities because they know their population the best, but instead we have what we have. But both sides have been involved with this and they know it. So it's almost like a big game. It seems like not everybody that's currently there necessarily was involved with going to this conference. However, you have to realize that these presentations here were put on by the Minnesota's Future Conference to the legislator. All the legislators are at this meeting when it's recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like the 2024 conference was put on by the legislator there at the U of M. And it's not public, it's private. So they're holding private meetings on it. So I just wanted to get your input on what I said so far, and then we'll go right into the audio.
Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me at all that people who are, globalist minded would be acting in a way that like globalists would. Not that they're necessarily in cahoots with like Europeans, but like they have this mindset that they're going to use the state, and they're going to use the state in a way that controls people and enforces their worldview and the idea of what they have for the future. So, I mean, these are the people that seek out the positions for, these positions of power through the legislation, through the executive branch, through the judicial system. Those are the ones that do this. So they're all the same, really, when it comes down to it. They're all the same. They have no hope in the future, and they feel like the only way that they, they're going to get what they want is by controlling everything. And it always comes at our freedom as individuals, those of us that just want to live peaceful lives in a way that we see fit, not how we're told to be living. You know what I mean? And I mean, ultimately, none of this surprises me. I mean, if you want to, actually, there's a really good book that kind of gives you an overview in the United States too. And Minnesota, I think, really plays to the central core of this, because you said that, this is what piqued my attention. You're like, well, in the 1970s, key people from Minnesota. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. So the 1970s were pivotal. There were a lot of big things at play in the 70s. There are politics in Minnesota, like Harlan Cleveland. But this is about the same time that Marxism is rising up. Okay. Literally 1972, the Libertarian Party becomes a thing. And there's all of these things kind of originate in that, that couple of decades post World War II, where they start to, like, the UN starts to become established, and like all of these big names. So the people that seek these positions are the ones that are ultimately going to use them in bad faith. They're the ones that crave the power, not people like us. Anyways, there's a book, Carroll Quigley. Do you know who that is? Have you heard of? Okay, so Carroll Quigley, you should read this. You like reading stuff. You'll love this book. I always get the name of the title of the book wrong. Let me Google it really quick so I don't say the title of the book wrong. So Carroll Quigley was a historian, and he sought out to record, the things, the little working pieces of history that nobody else was recording. He had access to people like the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the British, the remnants of the British Empire, all of these big names of people. He was part of that group of people. And he believed in what they did. And because he believed in what they did, he sought to record all of it. And so he wrote this book called Tragedy and Hope. You should go and find it and read it. Like, it's totally eye-opening. You'll understand more of this kind of stuff when you understand where it all originated. You should read that book. But anyways, none of this shocks me. Kind of because I've learned to see the bigger picture and how Minnesota politics plays into it. But
Definitely.
yeah, what do we do about it? That's the big question. What do we do?
There was a group in the late 1800s called that they had this group called Lucifer Gnosis or something like that. There's a bunch of esoteric people like wanting to push the bounds of the future, and like the two different factions of it. One of them ended up splitting off into like the Thule Society, which had a big influence on the Nazi type stuff as far as like their push for, if you've ever seen like their UFO type thing that they were doing and whatever else like that. Yeah, that was using a lot of the same esoteric stuff, but we were doing the same thing with Aleister Crowley and NASA and like that type of thing. Like we were literally they were doing ceremonies at Devil's Canyon or Devil's Mouth, whatever, there in California, for the rockets when they would launch them.
NASA was founded off of the ashes of the Nazi Empire.
Yeah,
like none of that is.
Well, both sides were using it, and so like these people, some of them are more futurists or like globalists than they are even into their own ideology. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Because like Blavatsky was a part of this, and you can go down the list, and so like both sides actually have played into it. Because Blavatsky gets into some of the esoteric stuff too, with the Theosophical Society, and the World Future Society is a lot like that, with the pursuit of knowledge and the pursuit of, at all costs, their future that they want. And so it's interesting with the things that are pushed. Elon Musk this week talked about the singularity, which is where AI becomes smart enough to be able to be smarter than humans and basically write its own code, and we can't stop it from there. And if you push,
pretty sure they've made movies about that. It never ends up good.
Yeah. And not only that, is you had people like who's the guy in the wheelchair, Hawking?
Hawking.
Stephen Hawking. That he was warning about it and saying it's an existential threat to humanity. Elon has said it. Okay, that's an existential threat to humanity, but we're pushing ahead anyway. And like the rollout of 6G, and that has already started. The big rollout for 5G was 2019 is when it started. And there's a group called 3GPP that literally runs the standardization of it. And the 6G rollout is now starting for the testing phase, and it's supposed to be fully rolled out by 2030. And so they used some of the crises because people were pushing back against 5G before COVID. And then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden people had to work from home. And everybody had to have 5G, and we installed it in the schools, and we installed it on the street lights, and things that people before would have said heck no to, all of a sudden they were willing to do. And so I try to also look at the bigger picture of everything. And so, yeah, I agree with the communists on some stuff, and I agree with the right on some stuff. And the reason I say that is like the DSA here in Minnesota, they're basically communists. They were doing some stuff with the city council pushing for transparency on contracts, and so basically pushing back against some special interests. Well, yes, I'm for that. I'm going to agree with you on that. I'm not going to just say I don't disagree with you. And there's some things I agree with people on the right on. But I just think that each side should be able to say basically whatever you want, as long as you're not like literally harming somebody. You know what I mean? And when I say that, I mean like, if you're actively contracting for people's deaths, that's not like allowable, right?
Yeah, but the government does it all the time,
Oh yeah, they do. They're
the number one mafia. I mean, they only take actions against other mafia because they don't like competition. That's really what it comes down to.
At the beginning of this audio here, I'm not sure which person from this group it was, because this is right here is audio from it was Arnie Carlson, Alan Key, Governor Wendy Anderson, that's Wendell Anderson, and Martin Sabot, the congressman, that was talking. And I believe it was either Arnie or Martin Sabot that was talking about, like, you know, you can't really get to know what the people in Minneapolis need, North Minneapolis, and he literally said North Minneapolis, if you don't go over there and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What a concept, the Republican Party. What a concept. You know,
the party won't have anything to do with the metro whatsoever, but they think they can win an election.
Yeah, and it'll come up again. So I'm going to mute myself. We're going to listen to a little bit of it, and then I'll pause it and we'll chat.
I am not actually hearing anything.
Then I'm going to stop sharing it, and then it should be playing the audio. Did you hear anything in the beginning? Like when we were playing the music? Did you hear that or no?
Yeah, I heard the music.
Okay, then I probably have to stop sharing it and reshare it. Let me real quick. I'll come down here. Share screen. Set. Okay. Stop sharing. And then I'm going to have to reshare it. Okay. Add source. Oh. No. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Oh, there we go. Add scene. Media. Sorry, I've had a problem where it's kicked off the audio before. That was share tab.
Be resolvable. But aside from that, there are some things coming down the pike that I think we're ill prepared for. The first is the United States is a debt-ridden nation. We like to pat ourselves on the back year after year and say we're the wealthiest nation in the world. We probably are in terms of GDP. But we're also the nation that most heavily engages in debt, growing it at a rate of over $800 billion a year when you put it on the accrual system of accounting. And then we invent all sorts of ingenious ways to keep things off the budget. I love that. If a corporate entity did that, we'll be talking about the who's gal. But when our national government does it, that's pretty clever. That means that we're going to enter into periods of very scarce resources. And the time has come for the legislature and the governor to begin to work out some processes that to a large extent replace the role that the Citizens League in Minnesota once played and prayerfully will be able to come back and play again. And that's building partnerships with the community as a whole, the legislature and the administration. There's no reason why you cannot create panels that include people other than legislators and start to plan. Start to plan on an era of scarce resources. During the Anderson administration, they put together a group, I believe it was known as CORE, and that was to review every function of state government, figure out how the delivery of services can be performed in a more efficient, non-duplicatory fashion. By and large, very successful. But if there's a bipartisan buy-in by both branches of government, the potential success is absolutely enormous, and it goes a long way to the restoration of trust with the relationship that you enjoy with your taxpayer. The second one that's coming down the pike, and there I would beseech you to use the resources of all of higher education, particularly the University of Minnesota, and that's the impact of global warming. And now the latest report indicates devastating climatic changes as early as this year. And it's easy for us to sit in Minnesota and say, well, the drought's over in Australia, or too bad Tennessee got clobbered, and what an unfortunate place good old Colorado is. But the reality is our time will come. And suppose we have a drought that was much worse than the one about 15 years ago. You're going to be besieged with all sorts of requests for air conditioning, etc. You have a whole system that's unprepared for climatic changes. You've already taken some very progressive research steps in terms of understanding energy alternatives.
I'm going to pause it for 1 second, because just to let you know, I have showed the documents from where the Weather Modification Organization and then the Weather Modification Program, both for the U.S. and like worldwide, got implemented in the right around the same time in the 70s. And Harlan Cleveland actually is noted as one of the people that was pushing it. Weird. But yeah, right. But it actually dealt with weather modification. And why would NOAA be under commerce? I have no clue. But yeah, they actually talked about like how to modify the weather, and there was treaties on it. And so if there's climate change, maybe we should stop modifying it and see what nature does. But
yeah, so this was in 2007.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of history of weather since 2007. That
What?
I mean,
this past year, I showed some of the beaming of like literally the radar, because it's okay. The NextRad radars have the Doppler radars. They have scalar capabilities, and what that allows them to do is see different things within the storm too. But when they beam the storm, you can literally see the radar beam going out, and that affects the particles in the air. Okay, imagine microwaving aluminum. Well, that's what they spray in the air. What does it do then? Right. And like with the weather program, if you go into the CIA stuff on it, LBJ thanked them for dealing with the hurricane over Florida and their efforts on that. So, I mean, like, yeah, they can't modify the weather, but then in the article that the CIA has discussing it, not article, but it's a CIA document discussing it, included in that is LBJ thanking them for doing it. So I just say if they say they're going to do it and they say they have done it, I just take them at their word. I'm not
right.
If you want to call it a conspiracy, okay, but if you're telling me you did something and you're saying you keep on doing it, then I think
when people show you who they are, believe them. You know.
Do you have any comments on that before we listen to a little bit more?
No, keep going.
Well, the debt stuff, when they first started out, it sounds a little bit like, I don't know what we're talking about now with the federal government.
Yeah, and actually, now that you bring it up, the in 2007, I don't know off the top of my head what the debt was in 2007, but it wasn't $36 trillion, unless we've hit 37 already. I haven't actually checked it.
Before the 2008 bailouts.
Yeah. So, I mean, and since then we have added a substantial amount. Yeah, it is true. It is before 2008 stuff. And then we saw in 2020 multiple massive spending bills. So, like the debt, I really believe that ultimately when it comes down to the way that this the country ends, that it is going to come down to just a financial collapse. And he was talking about like shortages of, goods and services and that kind of stuff from a financial collapse. And that if we were ever going to, lose our sovereignty as a country, we've made a lot of enemies around the world. And I mean, if I was an enemy of the United States of America, I would be helping to speed up that financial collapse and then just biding my time,
We have enemies within as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so I'm going to hit play again, and then I'll let it play for a bit. I usually do the episode for about 2 hours, but I usually play almost an hour of the audio.
Okay.
Today is going to be a little bit shorter because we did the intros, but if you ever come on again, we'll basically do the initial song and then hop right into it. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview for anybody that hadn't heard before. So,
but that's still not reflected in our tax system. So a lot of work remains to be done on how do you go through the early stages of preparing global warming and ultimately trying to build partnerships with the national government, and you may even be successful in persuading the White House that it is a reality. You're a little slow catching on. The third is to start to take a look at your own processes. Start to take a look at your own budget. There's always been a quid pro quo, and I think we're just as guilty, I know I am, of going along so that the governor does not touch a legislative budget and the legislature, by and large, tries not to touch a governor's budget. Well, it's a quid pro quo that should be removed. The truth is the rise of partisan staff on a legislative level and a gubernatorial level inevitably results in more and more warfare and less reliance on individual research and understanding by legislators themselves. And the time has come to create a neutral resource staff, which was common 30, 40 years ago, young law students working their way through, performing research in a nonpartisan way, and keeping all the partisan activity in your personal relationship with your party campaign committee, etc. But it ought not to be inside the Capitol, and I would say the same thing for the governor's staff as well. Because if you start to realize that your most important function is quality public service and quality public policy, if that's what you set out to do, you will by and large succeed. But I have no doubt that the agenda that you have laid on the table for this session, I think it's going to be successful. I think it's going to be well met. I'm very concerned about some of the outside forces that will have an enormous impact. You're unprepared for hikes in interest rates, which are absolutely inevitable. You're unprepared for the sliding dollar, which is, I think, also absolutely inevitable. And it's going to impact us. We're not an island. We're not divorced from national trends. And there's limits onto what it is that you can do. But I would certainly request that that be done. But I would place emphasis on the process of engaging the private sector. I mean that in the broadest sense of the word, not just the financial, but the broadest sense of community participation, bringing in the natural leadership of the state, if you will, working with the political system, and starting to plan who we are, where we are, what kind of government do we want, how do we define our quality of life, etc.
Who is this exactly speaking?
I think I accidentally talked over you.
Oh, sorry. I asked who was this that's actually speaking. I can't remember what you said.
I don't remember if that's Wendell Anderson or if that's Arnie Carlson. They had Alan Kui there too. Mm-hmm. In the beginning they introduced, but right without the introductions again, I'm not going to be able to remember off the top of my head which voice is which.
Yeah.
But it's one of those guys. It's on the One Minnesota website. If you go there, towards the bottom where they have the governor panel. And then they had a state senator as well.
My last pitch relates to the University of Minnesota. And that is, its governance system needs to be reviewed. I say that not in criticism. I say that because I love the university and I want to make certain it has the best management system possible. You are in charge of selecting the board of directors. When people tell me who sit on the board of directors that their function is to support the president, right or wrong, I know something's amiss. The function of a board of directors is to represent the shareholders, which is the taxpayer of this state. And there's a natural leadership in this state. When I see that people like Win Wallen and Walter Mondale are not on the board of directors, not on the board of regents, then I say we're not picking our best and our brightest. And too often we see it as a reward and an entitlement for past service, as opposed to who is the most capable of filling the various skill sets that are necessary so that we can truly define excellence. Because global competition is a reality, and if the research and the strength of that research is not here and doesn't translate into jobs here, there will be no Medtronic tomorrow. It will be somewhere else. And we see the outsourcing, the impact that that has already. And the same thing.
Medtronic sits on some of the foundations that sponsor this event too. So when he says that we need to do this, this, and this for this industry, well, so the regents in that, they sit on the Minnesota Futures Commission along with Medtronic and the nonprofits and the legislator.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear mongering going on. If we don't do this, then this will happen, and we must do this, or this is not going to happen, you know, or whatever.
Definitely digging into a little bit more here in a couple of minutes. If you go over the entire audio from the first presentation, it's about 6 hours worth of audio to listen to them all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason I've been breaking it into about an hour per episode. And by the way, she has kids, so if she needs to go, she'll let us know and depart, no problem. I don't know what you have going on tonight, but
well, we just got done with family. My family does Taekwondo, and so we've been at testing all day. And I do need to eventually go address dinner, but
definitely I'll just play a couple more minutes and then we'll be done for tonight then.
It goes with the search for presidents. The media loves everything to be open except their personnel affairs. It's true. Read the article about the sale of the Star Tribune, and it's so convoluted I haven't got a clue who owns it. And nor do they. You're right. But my point is this. If you're going to compete with other state institutions, if you're going to compete with Harvard University and Caltech, etc., and they run around seeking excellence in a private way and get it, your hands are strapped behind your back when everything you do is public. Do you honestly think the capable person that you want is going to publicly throw his hat in the ring, jeopardize his current employment in order to seek an opportunity to be interviewed? No. Why is it that the process for selecting a football coach can be closed, but the process for selecting a president has to be wide open? No, what you want are end results. Bob Brunix will be retiring in the next several years. It's a given, and you've got to prepare the processes for replacement, and that is how do you compete with the best and the brightest if you don't have the same processes available to you? Now, that's my pitch on a more private basis, but I do hope that we elevate that game because the university is a large, large part of your economic future, and we need it. And when you see a decline in the research dollar, that means there's going to be a decline in our capacity to perform well in the future. And it's not just a case of money, it's a case of excellence and commitment to excellence and a willingness to define what that excellence means. Well, those are my brief thoughts. Not so brief. Thank you.
Congressman and former Minnesota Speaker, Marty Sabo.
Sorry, he speaks a little bit slow, so I sped it up a little bit. But we see the focus, how much money do we spend on the U? And the U actually helped research COVID. With Fang Li, they actually sent samples to Wuhan and other places, like UNC Chapel Hill with Ralph Barrick and that.
Well, Waltz went and visited China right before all that went down. Literally, he was in China in 2019.
Mayo also has a testing center over there too, in Wuhan. They partially own a facility over there.
You know, he was talking about we need the processes to be less. We need them to be, less transparent because this is we have this institution that the people need and require, and blah blah blah, and we need a new president. So his solution is to make the process less open. I mean, all that does is breed When there's no oversight, there's no accountability. And when there's no accountability, corruption always rules.
We've seen
That's
that.
what happens.
We're seeing the results of that. Yep. I'm gonna play a tiny bit more, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry, and good to be with all of you. Let me make some random comments. I haven't heard really anything I disagreed with so far. And Arnie, let me also second that I can't believe you repealed the Department of Planning. And I don't know when it happened. But Wendy and I were part of a panel yesterday that did a taping of the background of Minnesota Miracle in '71. All the essential work that was done at that point to get it done came out of the Department of Planning. And the creation of the Department of Housing, later all the work came out of the Department of Planning. They were the group looking forward. And I'm always reminded of Henry Ford. He had two theories. One, that people who worked for him should be able to buy his product. And we're getting away from that in our country. And the second was he didn't want a planned society, but he wanted a planning society. And there is always a difference. I think the thought that somehow one devises the perfect plan is sort of scary. On the other hand, one wants the thinking process to go on. And that is absolutely crucial for state government. And I'm glad to see you are having this forum. Things don't change. We used to do that 30 years ago, and it was run by state planning. We also ran some retreats for members away, not bicameral basis, but on a House side. We went up to St. John's a couple of times for a day and a half and let members visit. There was division. We were in the majority. Our caucus was for it. The Republican caucus was split 50-50. Half thought it was the greatest idea they'd heard of, and the other half wouldn't come. And the people who came, I think, found it very useful. Let me say, I spent 18 years in the legislature, 28 years in the Congress. I would not change a minute of the time I spent in the legislature for any of the time in Washington. Because what you do day in and day out, it happens quickly. You handle a variety of subjects very quickly, and it has a tremendous impact on the lives of our people in many ways, much more except for the global issues of foreign policy, defense policy, and some of those things. But in the development of programs, your role is so much more important. And when you think of it, the states are really the center of our governmental system in this country, in both, I think, a theoretical and practical way. In a theoretical way, the federal government is a creature of the states. I suppose in reality, more states were created by the federal government than the states that originally created the federal government. But that's how the federal government came about, was because of agreement between 13 states to create it. But then you are also the focal point. You are also the creature or the creator of local government in this country, whether it's cities, counties, school districts. They're your creature. And one of the great strengths of this country is that 50 states do it differently.
I'm gonna pause it. So, part of this I did go over before. I just wanted to get your reaction on some of it. And then next week I'm going to go ahead and put it to where I originally had stopped. But there were some key things in here that I wanted to go over. Because as he said, they're planning. And so the time that was that Arnie or that Wendell Anderson that was speaking. Anyway, they both were right around this. So Arnie Carlson was in the 80s and early 90s. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure when Wendell Anderson was in it. I didn't know it was before that. Well, I guess it's 71, he said, right? For the Minnesota Miracle or whatever.
Oh.
So I believe that's when they were split before. Anyway, so you've heard that term this year again come up. Mm-hmm. You got to realize that 68 was the riots in that Minneapolis. and the
Okay.
flight of the people to the suburbs of the white, Jewish, whatever that was in North Minneapolis that left.
Mhm.
They went to like Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, and all that jazz. All right. And so with that population decline, they did then start. That was toward the end of the Vietnam War. That's when
Mhm.
they started in the 70s, Lutheran Social Services bringing over the Hmong in that. And I have no problem with okay, when I say this, this will sound bad. I'm not saying anything about them as a race. They were involved with the CIA doing part of the opium stuff. Okay. The CIA used clergy in the media. They came over here from their CIA operation that they were running over there. Vang Pao, when he died here in Minnesota, they tried to get him a military funeral. They're still fighting for their military rights for having been CIA operatives. So I'm not saying that in a bad way. That started happening in the 70s, and we did the same thing in the 80s and in the 90s, which wherever the CIA was at the time and staging a coup.
Mhm.
And so some of the refugees that came here were involved. And I'm Jordan, we did extraditions there in the 80s.
Mhm.
Somalia, we were over there with Black Hawk Down, right? We were doing operations. We're still have CIA ops over there. Djibouti, you go down the list.
Mhm.
But those are who they decided to go ahead and bring over to replace the declining population in the cities. And so when I say that, I have nothing against them as a people group, but to say that the CIA didn't ruin their country, that influenced things in their area, would be a lie. The CIA was doing that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I wish the CIA wouldn't be doing that to countries. um,
Right.
you know, but it just gets interesting with some of the intelligence ties here in Minnesota when you get into exactly who was brought over when. And they decided to start doing that right around the same time because of the demographic problems. If you go back to the 1977 Horizons Conference, they talk about some of the exact same things that they talked about in 2007 in
Mhm.
1977. You got your city planning out of it. You got your urban development and whatever else. They planned the highways. So the highways, like we see where like Rondo and whatever else were 94, right? And
Yeah.
people talk about 35, and that was planned. They knew what they were doing. It wasn't a accident. That's all I'm getting at,
Right. Right.
you know. So I want your thoughts on that.
Uh, well, I mean, I'm always going to go back to I think there's this constant debate. Are these people just stupid or do they know what they're doing? And I believe they know what they're doing and it's intentional. And, like people just kind of giving a free pass and being like, oh, they didn't know that this would be the result. Of course, they knew this would be the result. Like, they're working together to get the result they wanted, Um, and it's always going to come at the cost of people who just want to live their lives and have no desire to control others. I don't know. So, I mean, I'm always going to resort back to that. Anytime, and like I said, if somebody tells you who they are, you should just believe them. Like they're literally laying this out, and they're counting on people to not pay attention. That's how it keeps going.
And most of the people are coming up from the Central Americas and South America. The CIA's ruined their country as well.
Yeah.
So that's not natural migration when you go ruin a country and then bring people that helped you back. That's not like that. I'm not sorry. That's not like natural migration. That's not
Right.
free market, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And they incentivize it knowing what they're doing. If you look at history and you look at what happened in Europe leading up to World War II, I see a lot of things in the U.S. happening the same. And in 2019, I was warning about some of the stuff on the right side getting too crazy because I've seen it with churches with the Christian nationalism or in Zionism that was infiltrating the churches. Like one of the churches I went to before we had moved to Mankato, the pastor got up there in his Air Force Reserve uniform, talking about how we need to support Israel's military and go fight their battles because God is with them and we need to destroy people. No, I don't think that God said to go bomb people. I'm sorry. I really don't think he said that anywhere in there.
Yeah.
You know, but then when I started working on the left, I heard some crazy stuff from the left, even to the point of literally kill Whitey, and they don't need to exist. So no, I'm not going to say I needed to die either.
Right.
You know, so. Do you have anything else before we go? I know you probably need to get going.
It's been a long day. No, I mean, just, you know, you're on the right track, and I appreciate everything that you're doing, paying attention to this kind of stuff, trying to give it, you know, time where other people can hear it in a digestible bits, because it's really easy to get lost once you start going into these rabbit holes, you know, like, and then once you start seeing the bigger picture of things, it's very easy to start to become black-pilled. And I think I don't really have anything additional to add to it, except for that, you know, take this a little bit at a time and give yourself lots of breaks. And if you feel like, you know, once you start paying attention to things and you realize everything that's going on, it's really easy to feel insignificant when you have this giant thing happening around you. You know, it's easy to feel like that you don't really have any ability to change things. And maybe we don't as individuals. And that's where, you know, people coming together and making a difference. It doesn't actually take very many people, very many dedicated people to come together and make a big difference. And I always think, because I like reading history, so I always go back to like the Revolutionary War. Do you know how many people were originally in the Sons of Liberty? Do you know how many people were originally part of that group?
I don't know a number.
Yeah, it's only 9. It was 9. And they met together and decided they needed to do something about the British Army. 9. I mean, so you can, in the right set of circumstances at the right time, I mean, we have the power to change the future. So, you know, find your people.
I agree on that, man. And I'm not anybody that's against the system. I'm sort of for, you know what I mean? I think that we sort of need a do-over, because I don't think that the current monstrosity that we have is savable.
I would agree. I don't think it is either.
When I say that, people complain because the wrong puppet master is in charge of the puppet show, when maybe the show is too big and has too much control over your life if you're that scared of it. And you should be able to have individual freedom to decide your life for yourself. Yeah,
well, and also people are just afraid. You know, they don't want their lives disrupted. They'd rather have something substandard than be, you know, it just completely pulled up and started over. Even if that means there might be a tough time, but it'll be better on later down the road. You know, they're willing to forego that just to coast along at in what they're currently in. And I can't do that. You know, I have kids. I want to see them have a future. And right now what we have is a descent. It's not, you know, it's the plane is slowly crashing. It's not a complete tailspin, but it is still going down, and that will still be the result. So
this article's from 2023, and like literally going over the slowing population growth was gone over in 2007. The aging population was gone over in 2007. The slowing economic growth was gone over in 2007. The rural depopulation was. You see where I'm going with this? Like,
yeah. Well, and this probably doesn't talk about this, but I have read also other like scientific articles, or, you know, whoever it is that's writing them, they have the science that talks about that the population of people who are able to still have fertility and can still have babies is also declining. Yeah. So like while people are choosing to not have as many children, the people who can have children are also going down. And that's looking at a significant drop off by 2040, I think is what I saw.
Oh, definitely. We've actually reached peak population in Minnesota for native, like citizens of the U.S., whatever, that aren't immigrants. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but like it's actually starting to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've already reached the peak. And so if people haven't like looked into that, then maybe they should. And it's not saying that we don't need immigration or whatever else as far as it's done legally, right? But if I take 100 people and drop them where you're at, and they're from, let's say, Alabama, and we take people from your area and then go drop them down in California and, Washington to Florida and vice versa, you're going to have problems. Imagine halfway around the world.
Right. They're going to struggle.
So,
for sure.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and play the outro music. You can drop off if you want.
Yeah. We'll see you later.
Okay, I'm going to play the outro music real quick. And thank you guys for watching today. It's a pleasure to have Rebecca on. And you guys stay blessed. So.
Engines fired up and ready to help it soar. Flight 370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur. Mayday, mayday, dangerous lithium ion battery fire. 239 lives at risk, situation so dire. Lost contact with this Boeing commercial airplane. Faulty satellite data being the weak link in this chain. 20 superconductor scientists on this flight. Does that have anything to do with it? It just might. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's the 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0 point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 off with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. Where did it go? What's the notion? Which island? Which ocean? It didn't crash in the sea or on land. 4th orb out west for this sleight of hand. For 4 days the passengers' phones were on. Who's responsible for these people being gone? Classified documents like a sales promotion. Debris found impossibly in the wrong ocean. Dark energy, ether, cold fusion, 0 point energy. Not solid, liquid, or gas. Plasma is the key. A paradigm shift in our technology. An unlimited reservoir of energy. Floating through the air, round and round. As we sit helpless on the ground. Orbs of light defying what we were taught. We've been lied to by science is my next thought. Whistleblowers dying or getting disappeared. Heads of industry saying nothing to see here. Isn't that just a little weird? By humans this was created and engineered. 1, 2, 3 plasma orbs coming out of nowhere. It's the 777 smokes falling out of the air. Wide area motion imagery and military infrared showing us more and even more being left unsaid. 0 point energy, that's the technology to these EVOs that are defying gravity. 3 off with dark lasers pointing the way as they teleport Malaysia Flight 370 away. The ether is real. This is the spiel. The truth will come out. The truth will be shown. What happened to Flight 370? Around the world it will soon be known.